Okay, so I'm just going to play you a interaction that was uploaded to YouTube just recently that was brought to my attention. I'm going to play it, then stop and make comments. And this individual that's speaking, I have critiqued before when he said that there are such things as good police in a bad system. So that's pretty much the theme of what we're running here, except the topic's different, but the whole consciousness is the same. The point is to see what happens when you hold erroneous beliefs, how you really struggle to actually grasp where your power is and how to make use of it. And so this is for people who actually want to do that, really want to know where their power is and how to make use of it so you can actually act in a way that's going to align with what's needed for freedom to become a reality for all.
So the most important thing about that, as I just said before, is let's do an assessment of where things are at. Now, I spoke today about Rod Culleton. And, we've got the Rod Culleton and the Wayne Glues and the people such as yourself and other people in the High Court right now and different ones. They're going on about the Constitution. Now, I'm here to tell you that in real terms, like it or not, the Constitution is dead.
Okay, so much to unpack here. Let's start with the first two people that he mentions. These people that are held up as constitutional common law gurus, let's call it that for the sake of ease, as if they actually, how would I put it, as if they're like some kind of leaders, because they just say a lot of stuff on like they record themselves speaking on social media platforms, and some of them do some actions, as opposed to that they're really espousing a collectivist manifesto and they're calling that a constitution. Because here's the thing, the understanding of what a constitution is means you need to understand the boundary conditions of existence. Nature has its own constitution, which are the laws that govern all of existence. Without it, it wouldn't be possible. So once you understand that's what it means, then you can move forward. But so far, what Wade is actually saying is correct to a sense, because he's actually referring to people who don't actually know anything about what a constitution is. And then he's using them as like a standard of what actually defines constitutions. And that's where everything's coming apart for this guy. So he hasn't done his own independent research to figure it out for himself, which is actually his responsibility, like it is everyone else's. If you rely on somebody else to teach you the truth, then you're not actually sovereign. You are a slave. That's the biggest problem that's actually sitting underneath all of this, is relying on other people's word without going and verifying it for yourself on something that's critical, that you are responsible for by the sheer fact that you have a conscience. And that you can't get out of that. And so this is the biggest issue, right? Straight away off the bat, he's espousing something that's actually not the correct definition of a constitution. Now, if we take that a constitution exists in nature, then what's the human version of that? Well, it's to align our behavior in a way that's going to work with the laws of nature. Yet, what we do, and what anything that's called a constitution does is, well, it doesn't do anything really, because it's just words on paper. But how those instruments are utilized is done by people with corrupted morals. And that's pretty much all of society, if we're really honest. And so now we've got a whole bunch of people who don't have clear direction on what is the difference between, they don't know the difference between actual morality and moral relativism. They can't distinguish the two. And so that's who's running what we call leadership positions, whether that be through politics or whether that be through people who espouse to be part of the freedom movement. It's pretty much the same. So that's why we're in this mess. It's got nothing to do with the actual fair income constitution, because what that is a set of principles that exist in nature. So they're not man-made. They're just reaffirmed. And so if you don't know that, and when he said the Constitution is dead, well, he's basically saying morality has no place in our behaviour. The moral laws that govern the existence for all conscious sentient beings, he's basically saying that's not something that we need to worry about because, it's dead. Well, there's full moral relativism 101 right there. So this is a level of nescience or ignorance, don't know which one, that is sublime. And it comes from someone who didn't do their own research. They didn't follow their actual conscious reasoning that they're imbued with. We all have that. And to actually abdicate that responsibility to make use of those faculties, that's on each individual. And sadly, that's the state of pretty much the bulk of people who claim that they're in the freedom movement, let alone the people who most refer to that call themselves freedom fighters as sheeple. It's pretty much the same consciousness, just different degrees. So that's the first point that I wanted to raise before we move on.
Now, the people who are invading us, this is the nature of an invasion force. They don't really take any notice of your laws. Hello, like, my God, what's it going to take for people who bang on about this common law stuff and are all about the Constitution? That is over. So the most important thing now is fight to stay alive. And then possibly, if we win that battle, which I seriously doubt we're going to, we would then have a possible opportunity to reinstate our Constitution. But at the minute, the invasion force that we're facing, which is winning, I'm here to tell you, by a million miles, they are called the New World Order, the one world government, where Australia doesn't rate. There is no Australia. You don't have a sovereign nation. You don't have a sovereign state. And I mean, I've been doing this for so long and we're constantly being undermined and sabotaged, probably not deliberately, but by so many of these stupid people who keep crapping on about the Constitution and common law. I mean, get your head out of your collective backsides and actually come up to speed with where things are at.
Okay, so just going to go over some of the points that he raised. He first says something about an invasion force and he's got a real panic about him. So this is really, really important to understand this. So this territory was colonized physically by an invading force. That's really important to understand that first, right? No redress has ever been made about that. But here's the next most important thing, is that the people who settled this land, their minds were already colonized. So their minds are already invaded with false ideas about how reality works, for them to actually come and participate in this structure where there is such a thing as a superior and an inferior being. That's really important. And so when he says things like banging on about common law and constitution stuff, like I said earlier, he's taking that to mean these people who are using collectivist ideologies and the Communist Manifesto, that is the 1901 Commonwealth of Australia Constitution, which is not a constitution, which I explained earlier why. So he's using that as his definition, where the true meaning of common law is your actual moral faculties being the guide to how you behave, instead of suppressing that because you believe in a superior and an inferior. That's what common law is equity under the law, that we are all equal. No one is superior. There is no such thing as inferior. Well, that has never existed from the day this country was colonized, right? So you've got this fear of an invading force, but what about how your mind is colonized? What about that invasion? When is that going to be excoriated, right? Where's the work coming to do that? Because if you don't have your mind aligned with your moral faculties, if those two aren't aligned with each other, you're already invaded. Really, really important to understand that. Then he says to fight to stay alive, right? So this is like sheer panic. What's the point of being alive if you're going to remain a slave? Like, if that's your biggest concern is staying alive so you can live on your knees, what kind of fight is that, right? As opposed to really knowing that every single revolution in history, whether it's the French Revolution, whether it's what happened in Poland in 1980 with Lech Bowensa, I hope I said that correctly, and the Solidarity Movement. So they overthrew one regime, but the throne still remained. So then what's different in that country? They've still got a ruling class. Same as, when there was the Russian Revolution, right? Still a ruling class. They were just the Bolsheviks. What's the difference? What about what happened just recently in Nepal, right? They fully went after these people called government, but the throne still remained. They just elected someone else, a kind of ruler, really. And let's see how long that lasts while there is such a thing as a ruling class that gets to actually violate your rights in order to keep themselves in that position of rulership. So if people don't actually understand principles, they're just going to recreate the same cage that they've come from, which all those instances I've just mentioned are replica. So people aren't learning. So this is the issue. What's the point of fighting if you don't actually know how to live in alignment with what is going to create peace and harmony on the planet? What's the point? You're just going to be creating the same mess you're already in. It might die down for a while, but it ain't going to be long until it ramps up. And that's exactly what's happening today is a proof of. And then, like he talks about that one world government. Well, that's the hive mind that most people operate from right now. No one's called it a one world government before. You've just seen an external version of that now that you're spotting, but that's always been in place. There's always been a one world government, and it's satanic ideology that the overwhelming number of people actually participate in because they don't know how to identify and discern objective morality from what I said earlier, moral relativism. They can't tell the difference. Most people don't actually know how to define what a right is. They don't even know how to define objective morality. So this one world government, it's been in place for years. It's just going to be a different version. The things that I'm guessing he's arcing up about is he prefers to have his masters look like him. So he wants to keep that in place. He'd rather that than masters that look foreign to him. That's the scary part. But the treatment's the same. This is that kind of total not understanding how reality works. So I just wanted to really go over those points just to show that when you abdicate your capacity to use your moral faculties to discern the true nature of how reality operates, then you are going to go in this panic and you are going to start saying things that are actually contradictory to what is needed for freedom to prevail. Just a little bit more to play and then we're almost done.
And I constantly say, Carl, when Hitler and the Nazis rolled the tanks through the forest into Belgium, they did not get to the Belgium border and then say, oh, hang on, stop, hold, everybody stop. Belgium has a constitution. That's it, everybody turn the Tiger tanks around, head back to Berlin.
Yeah.
People must be brain dead and three-quarters stupid if they think that is going to make any difference. Like, come up to speed with the real battle, for God's sake. Otherwise, you've signed your own death warrant and that of your families and our country because you're wasting critical resources on that crap, and you are being a diversion and you're splitting our forces.
Okay, so now we're going to address the one about Hitler and the tanks rolling into Belgium. That's classic false equivalence right there. This is a real lack of understanding, and he sounded really proud of this, by the way, of how reality works again, because any region or territory that has a ruling class is already demoralized. They already don't live from principle. They're not actually really defending what is truly there to defend because they're broken already because they've lived under a ruling class. So they're quite easy to overrun. It's an easy thing to do. Very few people understand that. And so that whole, because there was a constitution. No, there wasn't. There was no such thing. There was a dictatorship by stealth, for sure. And they probably would have had some, things written in that made it look like the people in charge. But that's not actually going to defend anything. What creates a defense is when there's a connection between each single member of a territory that identifies as one. And you can only do that if we all respect each other's autonomy and we all fight equally for each other's autonomy. Well, no one in those territories was actually autonomous. They were all slaves. So they're never going to fight as hard as if there's a group of people who fully live free in the sense of, have that real connection to their lives are no more or less important than the lives of their neighbours. And then they organise themselves as a unified defence. Now, Rojava is a perfect example of that, and how they're able to defeat ISIS, and how a good portion of those defenders were actually females. That's your classic example. And constitutions, like written ones, don't defend anything. They're just words on paper. So that's like an absurd thing to say that. It's people who defend, right? And they just failed. But they were already demoralised. Now, the other thing that I'm just trying to remember is he said it's about splitting, forces. Well, how are you supposed to unite if you don't have moral principle as your guiding light? There's no possible way. That's why there isn't unity. It's got nothing to do with what he's saying it is. And he's part of that whole lack of understanding. So the very thing he's moaning about and getting really riled up about is the very thing he contributes to. That's the tragedy of what's actually in play here. So again, when people don't see reality the way it works, and they're unattuned to their true divine wisdoms, they're going to go down these paths. So this is a call to anyone who's watching this, if you've never heard this stuff before, to actually start looking at how you deceive yourself, right? That's really important. And if you're not going to do that, then you're going to be blaming, like what he's doing, everybody else. So if you're not going to lead by example and call out your own self-deception and show that it's survivable and that's a strength, well, what kind of leadership can you really offer?
We've got so many different people say to me, Carl, oh, look, Wade, I really don't know what to believe. I hear you say this, and Carl says something, and Rod Cullerton says something, and Michael Griffith says another thing. Jody Lowe says something different, Hoodie and the rest of them, and God knows what. So they say, oh, I just throw my hands up. I'm just so confused. I just don't do anything now. I just go back. There's our problem right there.
Yep.
We are creating our own destruction, and the government are laughing their guts out at us.
So what he's actually identified there, I'd actually agree with, yet I would hazard to guess that the way he's meaning it is that it's the so-called leaders that are the problem, the ones that can't get the same messaging right, versus to why is there a dependence on people other than each individual depending on themselves to educate themselves as to the true nature of where truth can be found? Why is there still that outsourcing? That's the issue. Not that there's a bunch of so-called leaders who can't get along and can't agree. That's not it at all. It's why is there such a thing as believing that it's up to others who, prefer the sound of their own voice, which I'm guessing I could be accused of it, really, and, their face on camera. Why is that a dependence, right? Why is there trusting in what others have to say as opposed to what you deeply know to be true, but it requires you to stop deceiving yourself? Now, that's the biggest problem. It's the self-deception and the attachment to it. And until that gets called out, this is going to keep continuing.
Start by asking what activities are worth doing for their own sake, not just as means to something else. Most of what we do is purely instrumental. We work to earn money, to buy things, to achieve comfort, to... What exactly? The chain of purposes needs to terminate somewhere. It needs to terminate in activities that are intrinsically valuable, worth doing regardless of what they produce. For the ancient tradition, these ultimate activities involve the exercise of reason and virtue, contemplation of truth, the practice of justice, courage, temperance, wisdom, meaningful creation, deep friendship. These activities don't need justification by reference to something beyond themselves. They are the point. They are what makes the brief flicker of human consciousness worth the cosmic accident that produced it. Now here's the catch that nobody wants to hear. These activities are difficult. They require sustained attention in an age of perpetual distraction. They demand you develop capacities you currently lack. They force you to confront your limitations and work systematically to transcend them. This is precisely why most people avoid them. Not explicitly, but through 1,000 small choices that prioritize comfort over growth. Think about your last week with brutal honesty. How much time did you spend developing practical wisdom, the kind of judgment that comes from examining difficult situations from multiple perspectives? How much time strengthening moral courage, practicing integrity when it cost you something? How much time in genuine contemplation, not just consuming others' thoughts but wrestling with important questions yourself? How much time in deep friendship, the kind that demands vulnerability and genuine presence rather than superficial connection? If you're honest, the answer is probably close to zero. Not because you don't value these things abstractly, but because every moment offers a choice between hard things that develop capacity and easy things that offer immediate gratification.
Okay, so that was an AI video that I just took a screen grab of. Yeah, it's a little dodgy in places. However, that doesn't detract from the actual power of the underlying message. So if that's you, that resonates with you, and you're actually done with the self-deception, you're done with like sinking into, easy ways, where you've attached to beliefs and you just refuse to look at them. You actually really want to do the work, and that's really important to you. And because you understand that really, if you're going to be a genuine contributor to freedom for all, that it requires you to actually do some serious self-examination and start looking at what's never really served you. And you've always known that, but you never really wanted to face it. If that's you, then I've got a place for you to start looking and getting some genuine knowledge and hopefully taking the care to actually action it so you can live into that part of you that really wants to nourish not only yourself, but the life that surrounds you. So if the content of this video has resonated with you to the point that you're still here, I highly recommend coming here to magnacarta1215.com, created here in Australia. So first place I'd be looking is articles, lots of top-end stuff here that's really going to explain how the illusion has been fabricated, I guess, and why it's so popular for people to fall for it, and then how to see through it. You've got learning, that's videos, reading, Act versus Charter, really, really worthwhile seeing that one, because acts are how your masters rule you, and charter is how we, the people, are in control of our own lives by putting a restraint around anybody who wishes to act in service of the people. If you're interested in seeing some actual evidence of what it's like to stand in your power to actually express the truth about how a true self-determining society lives, and when that meets those people who act as public servants come to enforce transgressions against you, that's highly recommend to watch that. You might want to take some action, so you've got the notice process, or you've got here some campaigns that are in train. You can join them anytime and serve them on your local if you like. If you're interested in finding out if there's any communities near you or starting your own, you've got this tab, and then you can always get in touch. All right, that's it.